Welcome to Between the Poles, the podcast where we dive deep into the heart of the pole community. I'm your host, Carolanne. Here, it's not just about the tricks and the spin, it's about the stories, the people, and the connection that make our community so special. Every episode, we sit down with pole artists, studio owners, and inspiring members of the community to talk about their journeys, challenges, and passions. So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's get real. This is Between the Poles. All right. Hi, Luna. Welcome to Between the Poles. How are you today?
Great. Hi, Carol. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. We have to get a little virtual chin of our cups in here.
Yes.
There we go.
Cheers. I got this for Christmas. I love this.
I love it. For people listening, you won't see, but I've got my little Starbucks Christmas red cup that I got, and I will use it until it falls apart on me. All right. Also, for people listening in or watching us on YouTube, get comfortable here. I have a feeling that a lot of you guys listening or watching don't know who Luna is. And you'll get to know about her today, but I want to read a couple of things. I have Luna's resume here and just little things, and we'll get deeper into it as we're chit-chatting a bit, but FYI, Luna in 2022 won Pole Art Semi-Professional winner and overall Semi-Professional winner. You also participated in PSO, the pole sport organization for Canada West, which is the largest pole competition organizer in the world, by the way, for people that don't know. In 2017, you won first place championship level 3. In 2018, you won third place championship level 4. In 2019, first place exotic level 5. And in 2023, first place championship level 5, which is the hardest category or the highest category, should I say. Massive congrats, Luna. Those are big accomplishments.
I was really happy about them.
I wanted you on here today basically because I feel you're not known for the amount of talent you have, and I want more people to be able to know who you are, what you practice, how you are at this level. And yeah, so very thankful you're on here today with me.
Thank you for having me. It's very kind of you.
You're welcome. I also want to tell this to our viewers and our listeners. I take class once in a while with Luna when I travel. She's my favorite teacher to take class with. How you break down moves and your explanation. I feel you're also really good in pole. We all have limitations. I've got limitations. I feel you're really, really knowledgeable about different entries, different exits, and what each one of them can provide for somebody's body and abilities. And I love that about you. I also love following you on social media. What you post, the tricks you're practicing, I find so impressive. And I really hope that our viewers and their listeners get to know you how I know you.
Well, thank you so much. That's really flattering. And it always makes me feel so good when you let me know that. I'm going to have to start posting on social media more often. I know I took a break over Christmas a little bit, but you talk a little bit about how I like to teach, and I do think that pole being the fledgling activity it is makes the instructing world a little bit of a Wild West right now, right? So what are best practices? What is the theory behind pole? What is the theory behind execution of movement? And that's something that I've personally really liked to develop in my practice, not just as a performer, but just as an instructor as well. So I'm glad that you see that. We can talk about that more too.
All right. And then to kind of get us started a bit on this conversation, I wanted to ask you if you could tell us just quickly a little bit about how you got into pole, what your background is, and kind of all those good details.
Yeah, so I was wrapping up school in 2017, and I don't like to sit still with my thoughts too long. So I was looking for something else to do, and that happened to be pole. I had a classmate who had already taken classes in town, and that was the first I had heard that it existed in here in Victoria where I live. Um, so, she lets me know I'm interested, but it took me a good 6 months to actually be like, okay, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to try this before I actually stepped into a class. Yeah, so that's how I got
What?
started.
What?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yeah. Why did it take you those first 6 months to try it? Were you kind of just putting it on the back burner, or were
Yeah.
you
Well, no,
nervous
it was
about it?
so I think pole as an activity is quite vulnerable, right? You're asking yourself to move in a way that is quite unfamiliar with an apparatus that you've probably never touched before. Um, to move sensually, which is not, I think, something that we are taught to even, appreciate or approach or um acknowledge in our general public, right? So I grew up doing martial arts, Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. I also did a couple of years of cheerleading in high school. And I mean, those were significant parts of my life, but neither of those are, they don't focus on sensual movement. They don't focus on appreciation of self. They don't focus on appreciation of one's own body. So yeah, that's why 6 months was just me hyping myself up for it.
Oh, I love that. And then can I also ask you, since you had a background in at least movement, right, with the cheerleading and martial arts, were you already at a place physically where you were able to lift body weight, or at least like part of it? And how did that first class go?
So I do think that my background plays a big part in how I took to pole. Like I said, I did have martial arts, I did have cheerleading, and that was just me growing up as a kid, right? So then as an adult, I dabbled with weightlifting, climbing, and like a summer of aerial silk. So I did have upper body strength. Um, Certainly didn't have it at the level I have today, but I had that background already. So that really helped when it came to coming into pole. And certainly that is a factor when it comes to, adults joining physical activities. Because we all come from such different backgrounds.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely. And
Mhm.
then, do you remember how many years ago this was?
Which activity?
Oh, your first class.
2017, February 2017. And I go in and it's a great time. I feel a little bit jarred by some of the movements just because some of them I feel like I was able to take to pretty readily, and others I felt so outside of my comfort zone. Um, just because I wasn't used to moving my body that way, let alone doing movement, I think, in a group. I hadn't done that in a long time. And I'm very sorry. My dog wants attention. I don't know if you can hear her whining, but she is.
I cannot. Whining.
Oh, okay. Because I
Well,
certainly
we love.
am trying to ignore it. But Cinnamon, her name is Cinnamon. Okay. But yeah, so I think it had been a long time since I had done a group activity. And this, you're throwing yourself in to a group class again. It's not that many students in comparison to say your yoga classes or your Pilates classes a lot of the times, right? So there's not that many students, and it can become really easy to compare yourself to other people or what other people are doing, how readily they're taking on this really foreign, different type of movement that you've never done before. Um, so I think that physically I took to it pretty decently. Emotionally, I was still on the fence with it, like after my first series of classes. So like 4 classes in, so it's like, oh, okay, yeah.
So you said your series of classes, was it because you kind of had to do like a certain number of classes as a new student or
Yeah.
something like that? Like
So
how did?
so
Yeah.
the studio that I had first tried had a series of 4 classes you committed yourself to. So I wanted to, you know, take the classes I paid for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
What hooked you after those four classes? Like, why did you come back?
Ooh, it was actually the people. So my mentor, who I consider, I guess, my pole mom, she had completed um school as well. We went to the same school that she completed at first, and she was now practicing as a lawyer, and I knew her to be an instructor as well. And I was just completely enamored by this. And I'm like, how can you do those things? How does your life even work? And I really wanted to at least, learn from her, meet her, because I hadn't even met her at the time. I just heard about her. So I go to that class and I get to know her, and she kind of throws the craziest things that she can at me because I wanted to try it. And I had a lot of fun doing that. So that's at that point I was like, oh yeah, I can get into this.
Right. And I know it's kind of like super specific questions, but so that's how kind of you started. Where did you take that training kind of more seriously? If that kind of makes sense. Like, when did you take it from like, oh, this is kind of fun and I'm like learning new ways to move my body to, you know what, I'm actually doing really well at this and I'm loving it and I'm going to kind of commit more time to it?
Really, I think that I have to give credit to the community for that, right? Because I had another mentor instructor, actually, Rochelle, she owns House of Pole now. She was my
Shout
very
out to
first,
House of Pole in
yeah,
Victoria, by the way. If you travel to BC and you're in Victoria, please do go to House of Pole. I go, that's where I train with Luna when I travel to Victoria. It is amazing.
we'd love you to visit. Yeah, let me see. What was I saying? Yes, the community. Rochelle was like, hey, Pole Sport Organization is hosting a competition. Why don't you give it a try? And I'm like, bitch, I've done like 8 classes. I don't know what's happening. But she kind of sold me on it between her and Jane, my pole mom. The concept of needing to have this certain level of competition was in my head. Like pole sport organization, I think, is a little bit more of a community building and a personal goal setting kind of endeavor. And it really pushed me to give it a try. I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot from that. And around that same point, when I completed the competition, the studio was still growing and they were looking for new instructors as well. No, but that became 2019, I think, when I officially took it on. But anyways, PSO 2017, that's when I was like, hey, I can do this, and the competition really boosted my confidence. And I know that competition isn't everyone's cup of tea, and that's totally valid, but it is mine. So, yeah, that's what kind of spurred it on. I was like, hey, I did pretty well in this competition, and I want to be good, I want to be good.
Also, can you tell us a little bit more of like, what is your style? How would you describe your pole style? What fits for your body? And maybe from the start, and maybe that did change with your pole journey, but was there kind of a couple of moves or a series of moves that kind of naturally fit well with your body? And then, yeah, would you mind kind of touching up on those?
Yeah. So when I started, it was 100% the tricks for me, right? I get introduced to these. I guess I like to think of them as challenges or puzzles, and I'm a little bit more of a, if you wanted to, identify it as something, a type A person. So, check, 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 trick, 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 trick. And that was a fairly nice way to get positive feedback out of completing, a list of items that were introduced to me, if you can describe it like that. So that's how I started, I think, very early on initially, and what attracted me to it. But with the competition coming in, it kind of opened up the more artistic elements of it. Part of the reason, as well, that I wanted to get into pole dancing is while I had physical activity in my background. I didn't have dance in my background. And I liked the idea of moving fluidly. I liked the idea of moving in a way that was aesthetic or pleasing, or enjoyable, and also think a way to interpret musicality. And I had none of that. So while I really enjoyed tricks, part of doing the competition and continuing to learn was how to execute those tricks in a way that was artistically pleasing. I do have some art in my background, and I didn't want to just be a trick girly, you know? I wanted to do something with that and create art. So I think if the question is how would I describe my style, as aspirationally, I'd like to be a chameleon. I'd like to be able to do all the things. And like, I would be remiss to say that, like, I didn't, like, as you can see, I didn't start as a stripper, right? But pole obviously comes from stripping. And I think it's important to note that, because I think that all of us coming into pole have this opportunity to learn and enjoy sensual movement. And we're so like lucky to be able to do that and approach it in a positive way, ideally. So I try to incorporate that sensuality into my movement as well. So yeah, all of it. I like big, I like sensual, I like sharp, I like fluid, big tricks, flips. Yeah, I like to incorporate it all
Is
together.
there kind of a series of moves or a move in particular that you're obsessed with, that you really enjoy? And if so, which one is it? Or which ones are they?
Really enjoy. Ooh. So I had like an absolute obsession with Fonji for the longest time, and I was like, I'm gonna nail it, gonna get it. Um, I think my style of learning with pole has actually been very, I guess, vertical in my learning. And what I mean by that is I think that there are oftentimes studios will classify levels of tricks. And within each level, there is a number of tricks that you can learn. I feel like I went to 0 to 100 probably too quickly, because I'm like, oh, this spongy, I want to try it. And I worked, a lot on that before coming back and then looking at more, what you might call lower levels of movement, but nonetheless equally important. So your vortexes and your um, just anything from an inside leg hang. Yeah. So I think, does that answer the question? I went off on a
Yes.
tangent.
Yes, and then I wanted to also kind of ask you the same, but for more of the dance aspect of it and the choreo and the heels aspect of it. When you do dance or when you do put choreo together, what is your style? Because within that category, there's different styles as well. What
For
do
sure.
you kind of find yourself in most of the time, or your favorites? I'm not even sure
Yeah.
how to ask it. Because a lot
Yeah.
of us do a little bit of everything. I think you're
Totally.
right on. You do kind of touch up on, and I love moving my bodies in different ways, and I do different kind of songs and genre and all that. But I guess we all have naturally something we're a little more attracted to. What would be yours, choreo wise?
Oreo, I think I really like to barefoot heels tricks, if that makes sense. So I really like a lot of the heels low flow, but I also like to have my foot available for up the pole tricks where the foot might be involved. So being able to do heels flow barefoot so that I can then do tricks up the pole as well is kind of the vibe. So that combined with a little bit of like sad flow, sad sensual flow, sad sexy flow.
And see, if you had asked me as a student when I take your choreo, and to be fair, I haven't taken a bunch of your choreo. Usually I take a
Mm-hmm.
lot of your tricks. And when I take private with you, I I'm like, here's a list of things I'm really needing like help with. But the kind of couple of choreos I did with you, I find they're super energetic and really kind of artistic, if that makes any sense. I feel you're really good
Cute.
to cue the music and then make the choreo really fit and make sense to the song we're doing. Like
Cute. I
those little
try.
really, yeah. So see,
So
I'm
I would,
super interested with what you're.
yeah, no, no, and that's a good point. So I would say that there's a distinction between what I trend to myself in my,
Mhm.
in my personal time versus what I think I want to cultivate in my lessons, um, and in my instruction. Um, and I think that when it comes to the choreo classes I teach, things I value, are musicality, variety, and accessibility. Um, that one I've had to learn, but I do want things to be accessible. Um, so when it comes to creating classes, I put a lot of time into, and I'm glad you think that that's the case because I really want it to be artistic. um, that element of it, that element of it. I also, and probably too much, come up with variety because I don't want people to be bored. So if there are lots of fun, cutesy elements, that's kind of where that's coming from. So
Yeah. Do a
yeah.
really good job at it. And then it kind of brings me to the next question I had, just because I'm thinking now, like, yeah, who we are as pole instructors is aligned with who we are as polars, but there is a difference, right? Because you are catering to your students and depending on the studio you're at, like you were explaining, most studios kind of have categories or levels, and then you're trying to teach kind of within those boundaries. So yes, it is a representation of who you are, but we train very differently as when we train for ourselves or when we're building things for ourselves. So that was a very valid point. So it would make sense that what I learned from you in those choreo class would still be a little different of what you do by yourself when it comes to what you want to do, you want to build for your person.
Yeah, and when I make those classes, something I think about as well is, what would I have liked as a new student? Not being from a dance background, I used to get really annoyed with any choreos above a minute. I'm like, my brain can't hold all this material. Just I can't. I'm annoyed. I'm not getting it right, and I'm not happy with myself, and that's really discouraging. And like in retrospect, I probably was like absolutely fine as a student, and it's great. But it's really hard when you yourself are the student and you're being hard on yourself, right? So I try my best to form the class in a way that doesn't cause that. I try to not make the choreos too long, at least on the beginner levels, and work towards movements that feel fun. I think is where I go with that. Not necessarily how I would plan a competition piece, but definitely how I plan class pieces, because there's material to learn in class and then something else on executing a performance. Um, yeah, and I would also say I should note I was one of those kids that was forced to learn piano, so I have music in my background too. I mean, certainly not a whole, I can't freestyle a musical piece on the piano but anymore, but I have some music theory which helps with teaching as well.
Yeah. And I feel like it does also show, let's say, how you teach choreo compared to how I teach choreo. I have no dance background, no music background. So I will teach those choreo class being like, oh, and then you'll hear this in the song. And then a lot of times when I take classes with you, you're like, 3, 4, 5, let's do it. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. Wow, thank you for yelling those numbers, or else I'd be so lost. But I do tend to agree with you how I teach those choreo class as well. Because a lot of people that start pole don't necessarily have a dance background. I feel if I teach more than kind of a minute choreo, people are just spacing out. It's
Yeah,
too much. We're
mine just
trying to,
melts.
yeah, and we're trying to remember tricks or sequences. And I also tend to just look who's coming, and I'm like, oh, they asked for this last time, or they want to learn this. Let me try to put this in the choreo. So we're also like breaking down, like, okay, you have to go this way, and this is how it works. If we're at like a minute and a half, 2 minutes choreo, then I'm like, yeah, I've lost everybody now.
Totally, totally. Well, and I think as well, it is, you're saying you didn't come with that music background. I didn't come with that dance background. I do think that that's beneficial in a lot of ways because you come from this perspective of someone who, as an adult, may not have any of this background either. So, what is important for those students to learn? What did you feel like would have really helped you that time? And you can incorporate that too as an instructor now, right? So, like for example, I do count a little bit to count people into parts of the song to start dancing. I'm not very good at 1 and 2, 3 and 4, making sure each movement is aligned with a number. And frankly, I don't think that's the purpose a lot of the times when we teach choreo classes. I think for me, at least, depending on the level of choreo, at least at House of Pole, we have a level 1 / a beginner with no requirement to have even touched a pole before. And we have 2, which is you've learned to invert at least. And then level 3, which was most recently introduced, that is, all out. The teacher is allowed to throw anything at you and you're just supposed to take it. And I think that the purpose, at least in those first levels, is to understand moving around the pole. The pole is a circle. It can be a very new form of movement, and moving around in a circle can be very disorienting for people. So just getting used to that, using the pole for support, knowing how to get down to the floor and off the floor. That's that to me, and feeling comfortable doing that, right? And feeling good doing that. That to me is more important than, getting your counts just right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it kind of brings me to my next question was, because you do teach and all of that, but for your own journey, where you're at right now, what challenges do you like? Who do you follow? Who do you take classes to? Like, how are you training yourself? Because you kind of get to a certain level at some point, and I'm like, I am not there. So I have answers for myself. I still take classes with people because I can still learn and everybody can learn a lot. I know that, but like you get to a certain level and I'm like, who do you take classes to? Like, how do you train? Who do you follow?
Totally. Frankly, I should take more classes. I really should. And I could take classes from the instructors that we have at House of Pole, and I would learn. I would. But I think that increasing pole technique has kind of been a goal that I had put a little bit on the back burner through 2023, 2024. And then I think halfway through 2024, I was like, okay, we're slowly going to get back into it now. So the thing I'm perfecting right now is flick flack. And that still scares me, but I really want to. For those that don't follow the pole trick names, or there are a million pole trick names for like a million different moves all at the same time. And it's a mess. But anyways, flick flack, you jump back into an Aisha position. That's one that still scares me. And I think on top of that, there's unlocking a move. There's, hitting a move once, and then there's being able to execute that in a performance, in a song, in a dance, and not feel like you're going to fall on your face. Those are kind of the things I'm focusing on right now. There are a lot of one-handed movements on spin pole that I don't have access to yet, but I would really like to. So that's something I'm thinking of right now. And then in terms of training, you're right. Like, I think pole being small, in everywhere you go, really, there's not huge communities. Some bigger than others. So it does require reaching out. And I think so I have a few, I wrote them down. I was Coco Kihong, Heidi Coker, Phoenix Kazre, Spinny Minnie, Marlo Fiskin, Pole Ninja. Those are just some that I think about. They're amazing. I should take their classes. I should take more of their classes. I've done like a few online during the COVID days, and I really should do more. But I will say that it's harder to really get a lot out of online pole training, for myself at least, versus in-person training. So again, I think that instructors at our studios, we learn from each other all the time, and it's really great. And even if not learning per se, just workshopping with each other, breaking things down, nerding out to like the theory behind a trick, all of that. Yeah. So that's how I learn right now.
I guess what I want to say is like, for the level you're at, let's say if we talk about the flick flag, how would you even approach that? Because at some point, I feel like online does a lot for a certain level, but you're now at a level that I feel like spots or like really big crash mats or stuff like that. And they get harder and harder to spot. Like the flick flag, like you start with movement into that. Like that by itself is really hard to spot.
Totally.
How would you approach even like the journey to start training that move? Do you know what I mean?
So I find that I'm primarily a visual learner, but also kinetic as well. So I learn as I move. So luckily, being a visual learner, I'm one of those people that will, watch a Instagram video a bunch of times and try to break it down. So that's usually where I start. But I've also been doing a lot of cross training through 2022, 2023. And that was kind of my focus when I let trick training take a little bit of a backseat. So that meant gymnastics, a lot of tumbling, a lot of weight training, a little bit of contortion. So I was bringing all of those back, and that did help with the more, dynamic tricks, because how they spot or how they teach in gymnastics, I kind of took that back with me to pole. Now, with the flick flag, for example, things that helped me, the movement itself, you can train it on the floor in a few different ways. And so taking the fear element out of it, or the risk element out of it, so that you can train the movement without the jumping, there are a few different ways you can do that. And that's just something that I kind of came to myself when I was training for it. When I first started learning it, I actually just asked a friend, I'm like, hey, can you spot me? Just kind of, if you die, you die kind of thing, right? Which I don't recommend. But that's kind of how I started it, versus, I guess, how I've developed my thoughts on it. And I think that I agree with you when it comes to pole training, pole theory, pole certification. Honestly, it's not out there. At least it's not out there formally, right? So you don't have a formalized way or technique to learn these higher level tricks. And instead, what I find myself doing is I develop or think about the theory behind it as I go along. So that's also informed my instruction as we've gone forward. Yeah.
And then because you spoke a little bit about it earlier, saying like it's something to get a move once, but it's something else to have it and be confident that you can. When would you tell yourself, you know what, I have this move and I feel confident putting it in my next competition piece? Like, how do you go from kind of training something specific to being like, you know what, I will actually put this into a piece?
I think my approach to that has changed over time. In 2017, in my first competition, I was like, I saw that once. Oh, like I haven't gotten it yet, but like I think it looks cool and I might be able to bring it in. And I try it. It may or may not work out. And that was my approach at the time. So my approach when I started was, oh, hey, let's just, if I hit it once, I can get it in performance, right? Not true. Learned a lot from that. I think at this point, if I can hit it pretty consistently, like for example, Flick Flack, I don't have it 100%. I've decided, hey, I do want to work on this for my next competition piece. And it happens kind of simultaneously. It's like, okay, if I can hit it in isolation, separate from a performance, most of the time, let's say 80, 90%, then it's ready to incorporate into a combination in a performance. And so the decision to either sign up for a performance or a competition kind of spurs me on to get that trick that I have 80, 90% of the time to, work on it in the performance context. And that's usually what solidifies the trick for me.
Okay. And then...
yeah. And so it kind of encourages me to work on it.
Yeah. Can you touch up a little bit as well? You've touched up on it already, how you started competing and what that process was like in 2017 to compare to now. Like, how would you now, like, from start to finish, can you let us know, like, how would you train for competition? How far out do you take the decision, like, okay, I want to compete this year, next year, the year after that? Like, how far out are you thinking? And then what is the process of you putting together a piece? Do you build that by yourself? Do you have any help building that? I know it's a bunch of questions, but can you just kind of...
Yeah, as long as you don't mind me kind of like having my trail of thought and trying to figure out where my answer is going.
Go for it. You're
Yeah.
For it.
I do a fair bit of planning. And that's kind of, I guess, partially a personality type thing. It's certainly not the one way, right? But how I go about it is that I plan, for example, the next competition I have is in April, and I decided on doing it back in December, right? So a few months. When I did my first competition, it was also a few months out, so I had, a good bit of time. And that one I had help with because that one was before I started choreographing. I started instructing in 2019, and prior to that, I hadn't done any choreography myself. That one I received help with, and that was really beneficial because while I had tricks that I was interested in and a song that I was interested in pairing those tricks with, I did not know how to fill in those gaps. Many competitions will have 2 poles set out for you to move in between. And so many people, a common feeling can be, well, what do I do with that space in between when I'm not touching pole, right? So all of that was my mentor, Jane, she helped me through that before I started doing my competitions pieces for myself. So what I tend to do nowadays and what I do at the time is usually I will brainstorm songs, brainstorm the energy I want to embody. And then I will write down the tricks I want to showcase, or not just tricks, but, flow, what kind of like dance movements I think look good on me. Things that I'm working on and, I really want to show off because I've been working hard on it, So I write that down. I'll then take the song that I choose, I'll parse it out, I'll timestamp it with parts of the song. So, intro, melody, lyrics coming in, first verse, chorus, second verse, chorus, etc., etc., etc. Climax, get to the end of the song. From there, I start moving different movements or tricks into different parts of the song that I think will make sense, that I think will work. And once I have that roughly written out, I will take a chunk, bring it into the studio, workshop it a little bit, see if the timing makes sense. Because a lot of time, early mistakes I'd make are like, oh, a drop on the static pole sounds really good here at 30 seconds. And then at 32 seconds, I want to be on the top of the spin pole on the other side of the room. And it's like, that's not reasonable. We're not doing that, right? So the workshopping is to see what's realistic. What can my body do given what I want in this piece? Yeah, so that's kind of how it goes. Do that in pieces until I come up with something, try to run it. That's scary. Trying to run your piece for the first time. Endurance, that's hard. Yeah, and then I keep running it until I can refine it and it feels good for me. That's generally kind of a brief outline.
And then this is super specific, but how would you live? How would you kind of train the week of competition?
Ooh, yeah. I pull back a little bit. So I don't want to hurt myself. If I'm not ready a week prior to, there's not substantial work that is going to change that. I should be, whatever level of readiness I am in that week prior to is the level of readiness I will be ideally at the competition, right? So instead of working so physically that I tire myself out or hurt myself, a lot of the times I will mentally mark the song in my head. So I will mentally run my piece to music while I'm listening to it. I will do movement. I might run my piece 1 or 2 more times that week, but I'm not going to go all out. And usually that's what I do to prep. Oh, everything around the performance, making sure that I have a warm up in mind that hits all the, strength and flexibility and stretches and exercises I want to do prior to performance, making sure I have all my makeup, my clothing, my costume, everything around the actual performance, knowing that's in place so I don't stress myself out about it.
Do you get super nervous the day of, or do you feel like kind of once you're there, you're in your zone because you've set up everything and because your training has been put in? Do you kind of try to enjoy that day a little more? Like, what's the mindset the day of?
I think that I'm generally an anxious person. So given that I'm generally an anxious person, usually I keep my energy I guess intentionally a little bit lower, almost a little bit tired sometimes, depending on the performance or the competition. So that's a common response I find in myself. So my energy will be a little bit lower so that I don't tire myself out through anxiety. And so that energy is saved for being on stage. There have been other times as well. It really depends, I think, on the performance / competition and the people around me, because I think that PSO, for example, is such a great environment and group of people, and you come together and meet that a lot of the times it just feels good to, be with that community, be with that people, be with those people. And that I find can be an environment where I feel a little bit more relaxed and I just enjoy my time. I've certainly also been, intense in competitions as well and very in the zone and focus. So I think it very much depends, right? But those are kind of the 3 responses I've seen from myself.
I think you're right. I think PSO, for a lot of us, some of the people that are there, right? They're fellow polers, they're fellow student teachers, pole owners, right? It kind of feels a little bit more familiar.
Yeah,
You do
totally.
other, though, Luna, and I wanted to touch upon those a little bit. What would you say would kind of be the difference between a competition piece for you and a performance piece? And how do you seek out those performance opportunities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pole is not I guess, a type of entertainment that people seek regularly. We have strip clubs, and then we have not really many other venues. And of course, the strip clubs just aren't for your, there was, you talked about this recently, actually. And the place of pole dancers and strip clubs and etc. Right. Um, at any rate, it's because of, I guess, general society's stigma towards sex work. The idea of taking pole into certain performance spaces is not what people's first options are when they want entertainment. So at least in Victoria, it's actually more common to see burlesque shows. And, both being sex work adjacent, but not sex work itself, they have, a few more privileges of being able to find stages where people don't just kick them out or look at them with a side eye. And I've been really fortunate to be on some burlesque stages here in Victoria, and that's where a lot of my performance opportunities, at least in town, have come from. In those cases, sometimes a stage pole works on those stages, and other times we have just the floor, and that's totally fine. I like floor work as well, so I get to work on that. So if it's a, burlesque show, I think about theming is a huge thing with burlesque as well, and I love that. So it depends on the theme, and I really like to create a piece around the theming. I really like to create pieces around the stage that I have and, what I have available to work with. I will play to audiences. I don't worry so much about, the hardest tricks or the things that I want to showcase as like, oh, I worked really hard on this. Because a lot of the times pole tricks aren't really recognized as hard or not hard. You have things that are entertaining and you have things that are less entertaining. It's kind of the idea. So I think about what's entertaining, not what is the hardest. And that's what I like to bring onto performance stages.
Right. That at the studio, we have studio showcase where students will perform, and our highest student can do a move that I know to be really, really hard. And I know the amount of hours put behind that move, and it's going to get a couple of claps. But a drop and a split, jaws on the floor.
Always claps forever, right? So same idea, right? Versus in a competition space, you clearly have a rubric. There's criteria to fill. I take a look at that. And then I don't like to stick purely to hard rubric. I still nonetheless put as much of the performance energy I can into those competition pieces, but it's more about whether it's performance focus first or competition focus first. So the competition pieces tend to be a little bit more stressful.
I kind of also want to touch up on a little bit, and you kind of addressed it briefly there. Kind of the limitations on performance opportunities. I know that outside of pole, you have a very demanding job as well. And I wanted to kind of know, how do you manage that together? Do you use aliases? How much of your pole life do you share with friends and family and coworkers, pardon? Like, how do you balance that out?
Yeah. So I practice as a commercial litigator. So I am a lawyer that goes to court. And I really like my job. I'm fortunate enough to work with great people. I have flexibility in my work. I don't need to be working all hours of the day unless, a trial demands it. And because of that, I'm able to both practice law and pole. I do think that both of those things are equally me. And for that reason, I don't love to completely separate one or the other. For the purposes of social media, I also don't really like to use it as a selling point either, though, just because it's not something I do to, I guess, be an influencer or garner support. It's more so, it's just things I do. So I am open about it, but I also do not advertise it. There is no shame in doing either. And certainly I don't, have to deal with the same stigma as being a sex worker. But nonetheless, I don't control what people think. And I would rather not have that harm the people around me, right? So, if someone's a bigot, I can't help that. Um, yeah. So, aliases is an easy way. When it comes to sharing information, usually I find that people that are already within the community in the pole or burlesque world are a little bit more open or receptive to people being, multifaceted, having multiple jobs. Sometimes those jobs contrasting with each other and the need for discretion. So I find that people in those communities can be quite good with receiving such information. When it comes to my legal world, professional world, it depends on personality. I'm certainly not opposed to sharing the information, but it requires first a little bit of feeling out to see how they would receive the information. Yes, that's what it is.
You
And then
feel
as far as like an easy one to work around, as long as no one's asking, too many questions, is instead of saying pole first, usually I'll say something like aerial acrobatics.
yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of use that too. Depending on who is asking, I'll say aerial
Right.
fitness
Yeah.
instead
Yeah.
of like
Well,
pole.
and it's like it's an interesting conversation, right? Because there's certainly nothing wrong with it being pole, but at the same time, you only have so much time to parse out people's stigmas, and you're not being paid for that right now. Yeah.
And then can I ask you kind of just quickly as well, how do you go about it with your friends and your family?
Mhm. I think that my family has been pretty okay with it for the most part. Some parts of my family are quite religious, but they I think my mom's first experience with pole came from something like, America's Got Talent or something, where it's very fitness oriented and, all very PG. So she's like, oh, that's so impressive, da da da, right? She came to support me at a pole competition. I thought that was really nice. But she was not pleased with the heels elements. And I was like, oh, okay, well, you know. Um, she's not on my Instagram, but and she asked me about my Instagram once, and I was like, "You're not gonna like my Instagram, Mom." She's like, "Oh, how do you know?" Like, you're welcome to see, but you're not gonna like it. Yeah, she didn't like it. So again, open, but also aware that not everyone's gonna take it the right way, and you just kind of have to manage that. Um, and advocacy is important. Advocate where you can. But also, tempering your time and your energy and your ability. So that's that. And friends, I think I've been really lucky to be in a community of people that are understanding, right? That accept uh different paths. And I mean, more and more polls pretty kosher, mainstream. Doesn't really raise too many eyebrows, at least in Victoria here nowadays. So, yeah, haven't really had a problem with it.
It's good. And then we are almost done. I'm still like pulling time out of you. Lastly, before we go to our last segment, what's your next big goal?
Oh, well, that competition. So,
Yeah.
competition in April, is with CPAC, and CPAC actually, I turned down CPAC Nationals in 2024. There were bylaw things that we were talking out, and CPAC had done a lot of work with their bylaws since then. And so I'm really excited to, be a part of that for 2025. I don't know how the regionals, the West Coast competition is going to go, but if that goes well, then that goes on to Nationals in Montreal. Fingers crossed, knock on wood.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Luna. I want to take us to our last segment of today that we call the last grip. These are easier questions that don't require as much info, just to kind of quickly know you a little better. They're not that serious, but are you ready?
I am ready. I'm ready.
All right. Coffee or tea?
Coffee. This is coffee.
It's 3 p.m. as we are filming this in the time zone we're at, and I'm also sipping coffee before I start teaching tonight. Favorite song to dance to right now?
Ooh, I don't have one. Usually I just put my playlist on shuffle.
Okay. Most loved pole outfit or accessory?
So Lulu Adore is a dancer from Vancouver, and she also makes outfits with Balin Bling, also in Vancouver. She made me this outfit for dancing that is inspired by a Chinese dress called a qipao. My favorite outfit.
All right. Heels or barefoot?
Barefoot.
One word to describe your relationship with pole.
Multifaceted.
Accept it. We'll accept it. Spin or static?
Static.
Morning practice or evening practice?
I'm a night owl.
Love or hate conditioning?
Love, with the caveat that usually I condition off the pole. That's a whole other conversation.
Can you give us, and you did already mention, and you can re-mention them, 2 or 3 polers that you follow or that we should be following?
Oko Kihong from China, I think Shanghai, but I'm not 100% sure. Spinny Mini, and then her name is Uni Dances, or her handle is Uni Dances. Yeah, she has a dance background. She moves so cool. It's great.
All right. Your nemesis move.
Flexy things. I am losing my flexibility. I shouldn't say that. We all have different levels of flexibility. But I want to have a competition ready, Rainbow Marchenko, and it's very sporadic.
And then let's finish on a good note. Favorite move or kind of family of moves?
Flippies, like flips. Just flips. Just flips.
But and then to close us off today, can you just let us know how can we support you? Where can we follow you? Where are we going to see you next? And I guess you've touched up a little bit on it, but can you just quickly touch on that again?
My Instagram handle is luna.yen.movement. I also have a website, lunayenmovement.com. I teach classes at House of Pole, both group classes and private. I really like to nerd out to pole theory and, not just trick theory, but like instructing theory, instructing best practices. And if you're into that too, we only got to touch the surface today. We're going to have to chat some more. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff I like. And if you like that too, I'd love to chat.
And then for our viewers and our listeners, I will put Luna's handle in the description, and I will put her website and all of that in there as well. So you make sure you give it a look of you and your support. Thank you so much, Luna, for being with us today.
My brain is melted. Thanks, right. Caro.
You're so welcome, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Poles. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. Stay connected with us on social media, and we'll see you next time right here, Between the Poles.